Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jake and today I want to talk about Starfield, or more specifically Starfield Direct. So the showcase happened just over a week ago, which means I've had a week to digest everything that we've seen. I've rewatched it a few times and I've wrote down some of the key points that I want to talk about in this video. So this video is split up into three categories, and that is awesome things that I liked at the showcase. I have some questions, things that weren't completely answered, and I have some iffy points. Now, I've called it iffy and not bad because I don't necessarily think there's any bad things that I've seen, but they are things that I am kind of mixed on. So we'll start with the good, we'll go to the questions, and then we'll go to the mixed feelings. But real quick, before we start, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a like if you feel so inclined. It really does help me out a lot and it goes a long way, so I'd really appreciate it. With that said though, let's get straight into this video because I have a few things that I want to talk about, and of course it's Starfield, so I'm excited to talk about it. So as I said, let's start with the awesome things first, the things that I absolutely loved about this showcase, and the first thing I want to talk about is the showcase as a whole. Now this was a lot longer than I actually thought it was going to be, so the showcase was 45 minutes, and that was a lot more than I thought. I thought it was only going to be 30 minutes originally. I thought that the Xbox showcase was just going to be an hour and 30 minutes of a bunch of different games, and then they would do 30 minutes for Starfield. But instead what they ended up doing was an hour for the Xbox showcase and then almost an entire hour for Starfield, which again, something I wasn't expecting. This was a real deep dive into this game. I feel like they almost showed off the entire game in this 45 minutes. There's so much stuff to unpack here. So first of all, yeah, I want to say that this showcase was brilliant. They did an excellent job, and if this is how Xbox are going to do things going forward, like next year maybe we'll have Fable Direct or something like that. If all of their big games get their own directs in the E3 segments, that's going to be awesome, because this was a really good deep dive. It completely sold me on the game. I think it was just brilliant all around. But let's get into the actual game now. So the first thing that I noticed about this showcase, the first thing that I was looking for, was the gunplay. So I made this video a few weeks ago talking about how the gunplay of Starfield was completely overhauled, rumored to be by id Software. And looking at this gunplay, it definitely has been overhauled. It looks so much better than it did last year. You actually seem to feel the guns, the way the enemies react to being shot. It just looks a lot more fun overall, and it looks like the gameplay has really stepped up a lot. But funny thing about this is that this wasn't actually id. So Todd Howard was asked about this in a recent IGN interview, and he said that id Software did not actually help with the gunplay. This was all Bethesda, which is pretty impressive if true. But id Software did help with the graphics section of this game. They did come in and make the game look a lot prettier, help with optimization and just overall graphics in general, which is quite a shock to me. I really thought if they were going to use id, they would use them on the gunplay, but apparently that's just all Bethesda, and although id was helping, it wasn't with the gunplay, so that's pretty interesting. I thought I would just mention that. So I'm not sure if that leak was true or not. Maybe it was just someone doing a random guess and throwing that out on 4chan, or maybe it was real but they got it a bit confused. They heard that id was helping and they assumed it was the gunplay, whereas in reality they were helping with the graphics. But either way, yeah, I just thought that was an interesting thing to throw in here. Overall though, the gunplay looks way better than it did last year. The planets also look really good in this. Now, something that I was worried about in the last showcase was how desolate some of these planets are, how empty they are, and what would we be able to do on them. Like, yeah, sure, you can go land on a planet and explore it, but if there's nothing to explore, what's the point? And that worry was kind of answered here, because they use procedural generation a lot in this game, a lot more than I originally thought they were going to. So when you land on these desolate planets, there will still be things for you to explore, because it will all be randomly generated for you. There'll be enemy outposts and other things like that to explore. So it's not going to be completely desolate all the time, but of course some of them are. But overall, the planets really did look breathtaking. They looked absolutely stunning to just sit on, and just to get screenshots for desktop wallpapers and stuff. Seriously, the graphics on this game look amazing. Way out of Bethesda's ballpark here. That is incredible. I was very impressed by the planets overall. And that goes for just the whole graphics as well of the game. Again, in that video that I did a few weeks ago, I mentioned about the graphics and how some of the texture work was a bit off and things didn't look that great. And overall animations and stuff, it just looked very Bethesda-y and not that interesting. But things have definitely been improved over the last year. Again, you can see this. When I was watching this, it actually felt like a AAA game. It felt like I was looking at a real AAA game, which is a very weird thing from Bethesda, because Bethesda have always had that sort of Bethesda jank, and that doesn't seem to be present here, at least not graphics and animation wise. So that was a very impressive thing to see overall. And something else that kind of ties into that is just the high immersion from this game that I get. Again, when we're watching this, it really looks like it's a game that you can just get lost in, and that is thanks to the graphics and the animations and just the world as a whole. I think what Bethesda are building here is nothing short of impressive. That might not even be a good enough word to describe it. This seriously looks like it may be one of the best games of all time. I honestly can't believe that, like, what we've seen here. I I can't even put it into words how excited I am and how good this game looks. It's honestly groundbreaking, and the level of immersion that is possible here is just absolutely crazy. Now, there was one moment in this showcase that really shocked me, because Todd was talking about enemy ships in space and the things you can do with them, and he went on to mention that you can actually dock with these enemy ships and jump into their ship and just start fighting with the people inside of their ship. So if you damage an enemy ship in space combat, you can either continue to damage and blow it up, or you can just literally dock it, which is crazy. I was not expecting that. I was watching this with my friend at the time, and we both lost our minds at the concept of this. It was absolutely crazy. He actually referenced it to Black Flag, and he said he spent so much time just docking enemy ships and doing that kind of stuff, so he was absolutely excited for this. And it's such an awesome concept, and I didn't think it was going to be a thing that's possible. But that's not even all. You can actually dock the ship, kill the crew, and then steal it. You can take the ship for yourself, and I'm assuming you can sell it or just put it in a garage and keep it for yourself. That is crazy. That I'm going to be spend so much time just docking ships on this game. Honestly, I I can't wait for it. And of course, there was the developer interview where the lady said that she docks ships and steals their sandwiches, which was pretty brilliant. Honestly, that feature as a whole was something that I wasn't thinking would be in this game, but the fact it is makes me so excited, and the possibilities with this are unbelievable. I just cannot wait to get in. And while we're on the topic of ships, there was another thing that I noticed, which again I brought up in my video a few weeks ago, and that was how does allocating power work? Because you see these little modules like engines, shields, and guns, and I was wondering how important all of that actually is in combat, and I did say in one of my other Starfield videos that I hope it's something that they bring up in the Direct, and they did. They actually spoke about it specifically and said, yes, it is pretty important to keep an eye on all of your systems and where you're allocating that power within your ship. So that absolutely makes me excited, because it's basically saying that ship combat isn't just flying around pointing your cursor at another ship and shooting. You actually have to keep track of all of your systems and decide where you want that power to go in that moment. That adds so much more depth to the space combat and actually makes it more fun to do, at least for me. And again, it gives it kind of that Elite Dangerous feel, although even Elite Dangerous didn't have that much depth in terms of ship allocation. So overall, I was very impressed with what we've seen. I didn't expect them to actually answer this question specifically. I thought maybe they would brush over it or would be answered in a different kind of way, but they actually spoke about this in particular, which was very nice, and again, I just wasn't expecting. So yeah, I'm very happy with that. I'm very happy with how ship combat looks as a whole. Everything in this game is just shaping up to be unbelievable, which kind of has me concerned, because at the same time, like, as much as I'm excited, I don't want to believe it. It kind of seems too good to be true, especially coming from Bethesda, considering their past games have always been a bit, you know, Bethesda-y. But regardless, everything that we've seen here, it was recorded on an Xbox Series, and it just looks absolutely brilliant. I can't believe how much has changed in the last year, because I went out of the last year's showcase being concerned, and I come out of this one feeling more confident than ever in this game. And I genuinely think I'm going to go and pre-order it. I've been debating getting the collector's edition, but I haven't decided whether I'm going to do that or just the deluxe edition yet. But I'm definitely going to be pre-ordering this game, because seriously, it just looks amazing. A quick thing that I wanted to mention is, well, when I was watching this trailer, I did notice that when the player was pickpocketing someone, it didn't freeze time like it does in all of the other games, which was a really interesting choice. So when you're pickpocketing someone, their inventory pops up, but the world keeps on going. They keep moving, everyone keeps moving around them. And I think that's a really interesting choice. It obviously adds more risk to the pickpocketing because the world doesn't stop while you look and see what they have in their pockets. And I think overall, I actually like that system a lot more, especially in terms of immersion. But it was just something that I seen and I picked up on, and I just wanted to put it in this video because I thought it was a really interesting design choice, again, just to not freeze the world. And honestly, I think I'm on board for that. Obviously, I'm not sure how it's going to play, but I genuinely think that it was a really good idea. And again, it just adds to that level of immersion that Starfield seems to be going for. So in that IGN interview that I mentioned earlier, they also asked Todd what his favorite moment was while playing the game. And he talked about how he was on a planet and then a sandstorm was coming and he was in a firefight with a bunch of space pirates, and he then ended up boarding their ship to take the fight to them. However, when he was inside the ship actually took off the planet and went up into space while he was on it fighting with them, which was a really interesting thing. He said he didn't actually know that could happen, and when it did, it was kind of a moment of just like, oh, that can happen in our game. So I thought that was a really cool story, and again, the fact that stuff like that can just happen in this game is really exciting, and again, it adds to that immersion, adds to the feeling that it's like a real world, and there's just so much potential here for those kind of moments in this game. Like, everyone's going to have their own little unique stories of things that have happened to them because of how the world works, and it was just something that I thought was worth mentioning because I thought it was really cool when he said that, and again, it just built my hype even higher for this game, the possibilities, the things that can happen. So there is also space magic in this game, which is something that has now been confirmed. It was in the end of the trailer, you know, you kind of use like the force or whatever it was to pick the enemies up in the air, disable gravity. I don't know if they're dead or not. They weren't moving in the trailer, and it does look like the person at the front is pretty dead to me. Their face is kind of still not moving, so I'm not too sure what it is, but magic is confirmed by that. And also in the Starfield Direct, one of the developers was talking about alien mind control, and that there's a perk that you can get which allows you to control the minds of alien creatures, and you can make them passive or aggressive, and you can essentially use them as like pets. So all of that is really cool, and essentially space magic has been confirmed, and I think that's an exciting thing. It adds a lot of different possibilities to the gameplay, and of course it introduces a lot of different playstyles too. And I know there's some people that might feel differently about this because this is supposed to be a sci-fi game and maybe they didn't want magic in it and they wanted it to lean more into that realistic but sci-fi kind of aspect. But if you don't want to use a space magic, then of course you can just not use it. I just think it adds a lot of different possibilities for future playthroughs and builds, and of course it adds a lot of unique things that you can do in the game, things that we won't expect, like again, alien mind control. Completely was not expecting that. So it adds a lot of possibilities, and overall I'm pretty excited to see what space magic has to offer. In my previous video as well, I also talked about procedural generation, and I wanted more info on how that would work. And we kind of got an answer for that in this Starfield Direct. And I say kind of because they didn't go into too much detail about how this procedural tech works, but they did kind of say where it is and a little bit of how it works. So one of the interesting things that they said, which completely took me off guard, was the fact that every single planet is procedurally generated as you approach it. So again, they're taking that No Man's Sky kind of thing, but it isn't online. So if I visit the same planet as my friend, I think what they're saying is that my experience will be completely different because that planet will be generated differently. There would be different mountains in different places and different outposts in different places and that sort of thing, which of course is great for replayability and just it's always an interesting thing to do in general. They didn't talk too much about how it works and how in-depth it goes in terms of procedural generation, so again, I'm not too sure. I still have some questions regarding this, but it was really interesting to hear that every single planet is procedurally generated as you go to it, or not every single planet, I think most of the planets. I think there's a few that have been pre-built, obviously, for the story and that sort of thing, but all of the 900 or so planets that you can visit are all procedurally generated as you approach them, which is really interesting. It is a really interesting thing, and I think if it's done right, it could be absolutely amazing. But of course, they didn't go into too much detail, but it was still something that I was pretty shocked to hear, so I wanted to mention it in this video anyway. They also talked about weapon modding in this game. Now, I had a suspicion that it would be in this game, but I wasn't too sure. I don't actually remember if they even mentioned it last year. They may have, and I just may be being stupid, but I was always under the impression that weapon modding was never confirmed until now. And they said that it is confirmed, and not only is it confirmed, but it is very, very huge. There are so many different mods for different weapons in this game. It is the most that they've ever done, which means there's more than Fallout 4, Fallout 76. Essentially, there is a lot of weapon modding in this game, so you can do a lot of different weapon builds. And of course, just in this trailer alone, we've seen a lot of different guns going on, a lot of different things. So the fact that, again, there's so much customization here with the weaponry is just incredibly exciting. And of course, everyone is going to have completely different builds and completely different weapons that are going to do different things. And I can't wait to just start seeing people's clips of things that they've built and things that they've experienced. And although I wasn't a big fan of weapon modding in Fallout 4, I mean, I liked that it was in the game, but I never really did it too much. I never went too in depth with it. I feel as though Starfield's going to be a lot different. I think I'm definitely going to be playing around a lot more with the customization of my ship and the customization of just weapons in general, because it just kind of fits the theme a lot better. And it looks like there's some really crazy things that you can build here. So I'm very excited to get into that and see how in-depth all of this modding system is. And while we're on the topic of weapons, I wanted to talk about how firing guns in Zero Gravity actually pushes you around, because this is something that they mentioned. I don't remember if they said it in the Direct or not, but I know that IGN mentioned it when they got to play an hour of it. And essentially, yeah, when you're in Zero Gravity and you fire a shotgun, it's actually going to blast you back and kind of push you around the environment, which is a pretty interesting thing. Again, I think it's going to add to that gunplay and make it a lot more fun. And it's actually going to make Zero Gravity not only affect the enemies and the way that you move around the environment, but how gunplay actually plays out. Because again, you're going to shoot someone and you're just going to go flying across the room. So again, I thought that was something cool that I wanted to mention here. And the final main thing that I wanted to talk about was, of course, ship customization, because they talked quite a lot about this and they showed a bunch of different builds. There was that Optimus Prime looking ship where it was just a big mech that flew up into there, which looks absolutely ridiculous, by the way. I have no idea how that flies. Like, it feels like it would fall apart immediately. But they did show that off. They showed a few other ship designs as well, and one of the game designers was talking about how she made a ship that looked like a sandwich and was flying that around. So there's a lot of crazy things, and I know that the subreddit is just going to be absolutely filled with people's crazy ship designs, and I just can't wait to see what people come up with. This is something that I'm really excited to see what other people do within the game, but me personally, I don't think I'm going to spend too much time doing it. I spend a lot more of time in RPG games doing quests and that sort of thing. I don't spend too much of it on base building and all of the other stuff. And also, I'm just not very good at it. I'm not very creative when it comes to creating unique bases and unique ships and such. So again, I don't think I'm going to be playing with it all that much, although I definitely will be playing with it a little bit. But I am very excited to see what designs people come up with and just what crazy things there are. And I'll probably steal some other people's designs too, 100%. I'm going to, if someone posts something on Reddit that is absolutely ridiculous, I'm going to be stealing that. But anyway, that's pretty much all of the awesome things I wanted to talk about, the main things anyway. Of course, there was a lot more to the showcase, but I just wanted to cover all the main things, otherwise I'd be here all day. So let's move on to the questions section, things that weren't quite answered that I'm still wondering about in this game, and hopefully we'll find out at some point soonish. So the first thing is HOTAS support, and for those of you who don't know what that is, I'm basically just saying joystick and throttle support, because obviously you're flying spaceships, and in most space simulation games, you know, there is joystick support so that you can plug in a throttle, plug in a joystick, and use that to fly around. It's in Elite Dangerous, it's in Star Citizen. I really hope that it's in Starfield. I think that will add a whole nother layer to the space flight and the space combat. Although personally, I'm not 100% sure if I'd use it, because you're spending so much time on the ground and doing other things that I feel like switching from the joystick and the throttle constantly would be more of an annoyance than a fun thing that would be worth doing. But I would still like it in this game because I know there's people that really like that, and I just think it would be a cool thing to add overall. Honestly, again, they never mentioned anything like this, and I'm leaning to it's probably not, because this game was obviously designed with consoles in mind, because it's a console game. So I don't expect HOTAS support on PC, at least not right away. Maybe people will mod it in at some point. No, in fact, no, I'm sure people will mod it in at some point. But I would just like some official confirmation on whether that will be a thing or not, because I feel like it's something they had to have considered, right? Like playing their space game with a joystick and a throttle. They had to have considered it. So just some official confirmation on whether it will or will not be in the game would be nice. So the next question I have is manual landing. So we know that you can't land on planets manually, and we know that there is no in-atmosphere flight. But they didn't answer how landing at space stations works. So we know that there are space stations in the game. We saw it in the first ever teaser trailer. We saw a bit of it in the Starfield Direct. And I just want to know how landing at these space stations work. Do you simply do an animation like you would on the planet once you pick a landing spot? Or do you actually get assigned a platform and you have to go and land on that manually? Because again, that's something that happens in both Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen, and it really does go a long way for immersion, like having to fly around and find which platform you've just been assigned to land at and then actually land the ship. It's a small thing, but I think it adds a lot. And although I'm not going to be completely upset if it isn't in the game, I am going to be slightly disappointed because I just think it would be a cool thing to add. Again, this is something that they pretty much completely avoided talking about at this showcase. They didn't show landing or anything like that. So it leads me to believe that this isn't going to be the case, because if this feature was in the game and you actually land at a spaceport manually, I feel like it's something they would be showing off and talking about a lot. So again, it leads me to believe that it just isn't the thing, and you just approach a space station and it lands your ship for you, which again is a little bit disappointing, but it's not the end of the world. It's not the worst thing ever, but it's just something I would overall like to see. So my next question is something that I asked about in one of my previous Starfield videos as well, and that is still ground vehicles, because again, nothing was shown here, nothing was confirmed nor denied. Will there be ground vehicles in Starfield? Now, I would hope so. I would certainly hope so, because again, this is a space game, and a big part of that is landing on these 980 so other planets that have been randomly procedurally generated, and just landing and exploring them. But that's going to be very hard to do if the only way to explore them is to walk around on foot. So again, I really hope that there's some kind of rover or something and they're just saving it for the actual game and they're not talking about it because they wanted to be a surprise. I don't know. But again, it wasn't shown at this showcase, and again, that automatically leads me to believe that it isn't a thing, because again, if it was at the showcase, I feel like they'd be showing it off and bragging about it a little bit. So again, I'm not too sure how to feel. I would like some official confirmation. This one, if there are no ground vehicles, I think it's going to be slightly problematic, because again, walking around huge planets that are apparently life-size, like actual planet-sized planets, doing all of that on foot is going to be incredibly tedious, and it's definitely going to hinder that exploration experience. It's going to make me want to land on these random planets that have nothing on them a lot less, because I know that, hey, I'm going to land on it and then I'm going to have to walk for like 3 hours before I find anything interesting, which is kind of a bit of a shame. So I also want to talk about the weather here, because this is something that it was kind of confirmed but not really, and that was sandstorms. So we know that sandstorms are in this game. Again, Todd Howard talked about it specifically, but what about other storms? Will there be large weather effects? And I'm not talking about just rain, I'm talking about actual full-on thunder and lightning storms that affect the environment. Will there be other kind of storms as well on other planets? I can't think of any off the top of my head, but you know what I'm talking about. When you're walking on No Man's Sky and you're walking on a planet and then a random storm hits you, will that kind of thing be in Starfield? Because again, or will it just be sandstorms? Like, will there be snowstorms? Will there be acid storms and radiation storms and all of those sorts of things? What kind of storms and just in general environmental effects can we expect in Starfield? And my final question is about crew members, because I want to know how many crew members out in the world can you actually find? Because when they initially talked about adding a crew to your ship and adding a crew to your outpost, I initially pictured like an outpost full of people, like an outpost full of hundreds of NPCs walking around doing their own thing. And in my head, I was kind of picturing building up this outpost that would be less of an outpost, but more of a city. And there would be, again, just hundreds of NPCs living their lives, doing jobs and all of that sort of thing. But it appears that probably won't be the case. So they talked about how the people that you can hire for your space crew and for your outpost crew, they're kind of like companions. So some of them are related to the main story and others that you can find out in the world. And they have kind of different effects in different areas. So some of them are good at mining and some of them are good at tech. And they all kind of have their own unique skills and you can assign them to roles. So I am curious how many of these crew members are actually out there, because what if I have 50 outposts? Am I not going to be able to assign people to run them all because there's just not enough NPCs in the world that can do that? Or is there a lot of NPCs? Can almost every NPC that you find have a role in your crew and outpost? They didn't really talk about how many people are out there or how it works in particular, so a bit more info on that would be appreciated before release, because again, I'm still not sure where to put my expectations on the whole base building stuff, because I would like to build an outpost that has hundreds of people in it. I think that'd be a really cool thing, but it's looking like that might not be possible. But that was pretty much all of my questions from the showcase. I'm left with not a lot, really. The questions I do have are quite small, and if they don't get answered before release, you know, it's not that big of a deal for me. Apart from ground vehicles, I guess I would like to know whether they're going to be in the game or not. But yeah, my questions weren't that much. I feel as though the showcase did answer a lot and it showed a lot. So let's get on to the final section of this video, and that is the things that I am feeling mixed on. So the first one is, of course, the 30 frames per second that is on consoles. This was confirmed again in that IGN interview, that the game will be running on 30 frames per second on console because they would rather go for visual fidelity than performance, which I get. It is a creative decision, and I do get that. They're essentially saying they don't want to limit the game to increase performance. They would rather it look really pretty than, again, just run really well. Because, again, this is a game where you're going to be exploring whole planets, like entire really good looking planets. So if there's going to be a performance mode that introduces a bunch of pop-in and it introduces a bunch of broken shadows and kind of just affects with the whole visual aspect of this game, I get why they wouldn't want to do that, because again, a big part of this game is the visual aspect. I know people say graphics don't matter, and I do generally agree with that, but I think they do matter for this game, because again, it is an exploration game, especially with these procedural planets where the exploration is going to be about the visuals. It's going to be about finding great views and seeing awesome things, and that could be massively affected if you are playing on a performance mode. So although it sucks that, again, it is limited to 30 frames per second and there's just in general no option to change it, I do get the creative decision behind it, and I can't say I completely disagree with it. It is a little disappointing, but I do get it. And the next thing that I was kind of mixed about is something that I talked about previously, and that is the procedural generation. And although they did talk about it a little bit, they didn't go into too much depth with it, which, again, I guess is something that they want to save for the full game. They want people to be surprised with how things work and, you know, figure it out for themselves. But I would have liked some more info on how this kind of tech works, because again, I'm not too sure. That they mentioned that outposts are procedurally generated, so when you land on a planet, it generates the planet, it generates the outposts, and you can go there and go into an enemy outpost, but they didn't talk about how those enemy outposts are exactly generated. Will they have different layouts to each other? Will every outpost feel truly unique, or is it just the same outpost, but it's just put in a different spot? We don't know how in-depth this procedural gen is, which I think is kind of disappointing, and I think it's something that they could have talked about more in this showcase. And finally, and yeah, that's right, there's only 3 things that I'm mixed about here, but finally, my last complaint was that there was no blood in this gameplay. So when people got shot, there was a tiny bit of blood, to be fair. There was a tiny little bit. You could see blood kind of shoot out of them, a little blood effect, but it did not react with the environment at all. There was no blood on the ground, there was no blood on the walls, there was no blood anywhere. It just didn't react with the environment, it didn't do anything, which I think is a little disappointing. I think it affects the gunplay a little bit, because again, it takes away from that power that guns actually have. And when you shoot someone and just a little blood splatter comes out like they just cut themselves, it is a bit immersion breaking there. So I wasn't too sure how I felt about this. I thought maybe it was just being filtered for the presentation and that there is actually blood effects in the game, but you know, they just didn't want to do that for this presentation because they thought it'd be a bit too much. I don't know, maybe that is the case, but it was still something that I noticed when I was analyzing the gunplay and I was watching it. It was something that was pretty obvious to me. There were bullet holes and stuff in the wall as well, which made it even weirder, because the bullets would interact with the environment and stuff, but just not the blood of the enemies and the people that you're shooting, which was a bit weird. Again, it's not something that's going to kill the game. It's not something that's like super big or anything like that. It's just something that I noticed, and I was a bit kind of, that's a strange choice, and I wanted to talk about that here a little bit. But even if it isn't in the game, of course, modders are going to absolutely add that in. I'm sure gore will probably be added at some point soon too. I'm sure modders will get on that pretty quickly. So it is something that will be fixed with mods, but again, just a really weird decision, I think, to not have blood interact with the environment. It just kind of, especially in a game that is so heavy on immersion, it's a very weird kind of thing. But that's pretty much all I have to talk about. That is the main things in the showcase. I think I pretty much covered all of the main stuff. And I'm sorry that this video took so long to get out. I know it's been almost a week since the showcase happened and it took me this long to talk about it. I have been pretty busy and these videos take a lot longer than I would like to get out, so I do apologize for that, but I would like to try and up my schedule at some point and try and get these videos out a lot quicker than I normally do. But anyway, let me know what you think. Did you like the Starfield Direct? Do you have any questions that you still want answered? Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed, and that notification bell so you know when I next upload a video. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Jake, and I will see you next time.